Allahu Akbar.
حي على الصلاة.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
حي على الصلاة.
Allahu Akbar.
Going back to our Moorish literature, we're going to Savior of Humanity, the article Savior of Humanity. All right, in this electrified age, men are racing into this life without complete knowledge of where they're going or what the end will be. When riches seem to be their only pursuit, to be obtained anyway at any cost. When selfishness, avarice, and greed and lust dominate their very being. When humanity in general is left at the mercy of those who have no mercy on them. I want to stop right there. All right. So our prophet is saying to us, he's informing us about this new era of time. In this new era of time, as the prophet says it in part, is an electrified age. All right. Electrified, of course, meaning full of energy. It could also mean full of light. It can also mean, as the prophet would say, an era where there's so many teeming thoughts, or busy thoughts, if you will. Because the interesting thing about electricity is that it has to have a current, it has to have direction. Otherwise, it'll be dispersed everywhere.
Indeed.
So it's very ambiguous, if you will, all right? And then it goes on by saying that the type of people that will be in this electrified age, that the pursuit for riches will be their only goal, if you will. All right, when selfishness, avarice, and greed dominate their very well-being, and all of that is similar, synonymous with each other, but they're at different extremes. All right, and then humanity in general be left at the mercy of those who have no mercy on them, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier in the announcements about the Super Bowl, and not to downplay that, but as we in the Moorish Science Temple of America, it's important to us to know or be aware of every facet of citizenship, and that includes who is investing in the city. Why are they investing in the city? How does that affect us as citizens or the residents that preside in the city of Atlanta? Does that make sense what I'm saying? All right. So that's why it's important, as we were talking about a few moments ago, that we attend those city council meetings. Because truth be told, there are plans that are going on without your knowledge that are like 10 to 20 years down the line. All right. This Mercedes-Benz stadium, this just didn't pop up.
That's right.
Them knowing that the Super Bowl was going to be in Atlanta. This just didn't pop up. So you can be clear that the city, if anybody else didn't know, they knew about it. So they are guaranteed that the city is going to have some juncture or joint venture with the NFL. And so again, the question that you have to ask yourself is, set apart from the party and so on and so forth, how does that benefit you as a citizen? As a resident living in Georgia, all right? So this is something to ponder. And if you don't have any idea of that outside of the partying, outside of the leisure, then we have a lot more studying to do, all right? So now we're going to go into I'm actually going to stop right there. I don't think there's really a need to go any further from what I wanted to say. Our brother Joseph had given a measure in our catechism in our 101s. The question was, or the key was, what is the purpose of the Moorish Science Temple of America? To uplift fallen humanity. And the following key was, how did the prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans? By teaching them to be themselves. All right? When we understand the nature of who we are, the truth and falsehood strangely mixed, the higher and the lower self.
That's right.
It makes it, for lack of a better word, a bit easier to conquer the lower self.
Islam.
The breakdown when conquering the lower self, because it can only be conquered. Can't pass away in the sense where you're on this plane of manifest. It will pass away when the soul leaves the body. But as long as you're on this plane of manifest, you will be truth and falsehood strangely mixed. Therefore, you have to have the wisdom, the gnosis of the lower self.
Islam.
In order to have the gnosis of the lower self, we should know the gnosis of our people that are out there in the cares of the world.
Yeah.
If we are in this bubble of the Moorish Science Temple of America, this Moorish Divine and National Movement, then we are most certainly an island unto ourselves. But what's very interesting, going back to the measure of our good brother Yosef, is that he gave a measure on the image of, do I have that? Of the Quran questionnaire. And so when we see this Quran questionnaire, we see this as an open island. It's an open area. It has anybody that is of a sound character, that thinks their condition can be better, can come on to salvation. The Prophet encouraged it. He brings them in. That's why he's carrying humanity.
Islam.
Islam.
But if we lose sight of that, if we lose sight of teaching our people their divine creed and their nationality, and we get caught up in the frustration of, we think that they're supposed to know this. But we have to remember, we're in this electrified age. We're in this age where we may think that we know, but there's so much information that's being thrown at us. We don't know how to process it. We have no way of process. We don't have a filter. That's why a nationality is important. That's why a divine creed is important. That's why a culture is important. It says in the Quran of Mecca that I have separated you into nations and tribes so you may learn from one another. All right? So just because you filter it through a particular lens, you still have universal principles. So it doesn't necessarily mean because you filter it through a certain lens that it's wrong. But that's why we build with one another so we can come to an understanding, to an agreement, to a collective agreement. Islam family?
Islam.
But when you are able to observe how people process what's going on in the world, that's something that we should be very studious of. Because we'll get caught up in the information, the lofty information. And this is something that I talk about all the time, is being pragmatic, being practical. Our prophet says that you cannot attain economics without spirituality. We know that our problems in a profound sense is moral and spiritual. What does all of that mean? What does it mean when I'm not just throwing out these concepts or phrases? These are things to ponder, to think over. Because these are the things that are going on in the minds of our people that not yet know the divine creed and their nationality. Now it's time for my story. So there was this young man who witnessed 9/11. And he was living in New Jersey. And he was making his way to New York. And when the towers fell, he was flustered. His mind was going so many places, as all of our minds were. Because this was a threat that came on to the shores of what we consider to be salvation, the United States of America. No one could infiltrate this republic. So we thought. But now our security, our very security is being violated. So these are the things that are going on in his mind. And he was trying to catch his plane to New York, and he wasn't able to do so. So he had a layover. In the layover, he decided to go visit his grandmother. And his grandmother seemed as if she was okay. And she asked, what was wrong with you? What's wrong, baby? And he said, Granny, don't you know that the towers fell in New York? She said, oh, that's nothing. I tell you what, if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling that bad, I have a sandwich. Why don't I cut up this sandwich, I give you half, I take my half, you eat it, you get you some rest, and you'll feel better in a little bit. Right? And the guy thought to himself, man, how is it that she's taking it? But we have to think, like, this is a woman that in her mind, that was nothing compared to Hiroshima. That was nothing compared to Pearl Harbor. That was nothing compared to World War II. In her mind. Now here's the twist. All right? So the twist about this is that how would you consider that psychology to be? How would you consider the mindset of that person? Someone that is you would think that person is brave. That I often talk about how older generations, and younger generations should definitely continue to work together so they can understand how their things are different and how things are the same to work out for future generations, if that makes any sense. So what's interesting about what I said about the grandmother is that this is a form of PTSD. Why do you say that? Why is that? I did a little research. I'm not a scientist, but I did a little research because when we talk about the condition of our people, when we talk about the Negro problem, we have to categorize it. We have to quantify it. Because and we can quantify it in a couple ways. We can quantify it simply as PTSD. We can also quantify it as insufficiency of man, instability, misery, weakness. Those are conditions that, contrary to popular belief, that is ingrained in us. And this is generational. So going back to this concept of PTSD, let me read you a brief definition, if I may. One more, please, one second. Thought I had it up. All right. So, post-traumatic stress disorder is a psychiatric disorder that can occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event such as a natural disaster, a serious accident, terrorist act, war, combat, rape, or any other violent personal assault.
Okay.
PTSD has been known by many names in the past, such as shell shock during the years of World War I, combat fatigue after World War II. But PTSD does not just happen to combat veterans. PTSD can occur in all people, in people of any ethnicity, nationality, or culture, and at any age.
Okay.
PTSD affects approximately 3.5% of U.S. adults, and an estimated 1 in 11 people will be diagnosed with PTSD in their lifetime. Women are twice as likely as men to have PTSD. People with PTSD have intense, disturbing thoughts and feelings related to their experience that last long after the traumatic event has ended. Sound familiar? They may relive the event through flashbacks or nightmares. They may feel sadness, fear, anger. They may feel detached or estranged from other people. People with PTSD may avoid situations or people that remind them of the traumatic event, that they may have a strong negative reaction to something that is ordinary as a loud noise or accidental touch. How many times have you heard people, when you talk about getting organized or getting back together, and you get that pushback?
That's right, Mo.
You know, this is something that disturbs me. So lately, I came across this derogatory term, hotepping. It's disgraceful. And it's disgraceful on our part of the younger generation, because when we heard back in the times of our grandparents, or a couple of generations ago, when you were talking about hotep, that was peace, that was something honorable. But now it's being associated with people that have all talk and no action. That people, or with a person or a group of people that talk as if they have their life in order, but in all actuality, behind closed doors, they are just as conflicted as a person that doesn't have a knowledge of self, quote unquote. And that is a sad, sad case. But going back to this scenario and this issue, is that how is it that we as a people, we don't feel the need as a collective to, in other words, rise up, to overcome whatever issues we have? For one, because we're content. That is a form of PTSD. Because you don't even want to deal with it. So you'd rather be content in the situation that you are right now. And you get to the point where you're even numb to it.
Wow.
How about this?
Come on, Sheik.
I learned a new word.
Don't hold it back, Sheik. Let's go. Let's go.
So, in PTSD, there's a chemical. There's a chemical in the brain when somebody has trauma. And that chemical, when you get a chance to research it, cortisol. Cortisol is a chemical in the brain, and every time you have a traumatic incident, it pumps out this chemical, this fluid, almost like adrenaline. And what it does is it's supposed to soothe your traumatic brain trauma, because anytime that you witness something, whether it's a pinch or whether it's a car accident, that's a form of trauma. But what happens is when you go through enough trauma in your life, you get an influx and an overflow of this cortisol to the point where it's almost like blood pumping through your veins. So that's where that numbness and that content comes in. Y'all understand what I'm saying? I'm gonna be a geek for a moment. Character Wolverine. All right, the character Wolverine is a very interesting character because he has a healing factor, right?
That's right.
But the interesting thing about Wolverine is that Wolverine has a memory problem. He can't remember certain things in his life. He can only remember it by way of flashbacks. But the way it's explained by the writer, the creator, or one of the creators of Wolverine, is that the reason why Wolverine or Logan has these blotches of memories is because when he faces trauma, his healing factor is to the extent of his brain. So when something happens, his brain automatically tries to heal it. It heals itself. It heals the trauma. You go on with that. Right?
Praise the Lord.
So what is that saying about us? What is that saying about the Asiatic and the people of the Asiatic living in America? What level of PTSD do we have? And that's something that should be definitely looked into. Because if we don't, if we don't have an idea of the mentality of our people, and not just going into each and every home, but there's a general consensus. There's a underlining problem. Why is it that you don't want better for yourself? Or what do you think? Because everybody wants their condition to be better, and to a certain extent. Some of us think that some of us, we don't necessarily want to be wealthy. We don't want to be rich. But what we may equate to being rich, or what we may think is comfortable, or yeah, I said it right. What we may think is rich is really just comfortable. We want a house, a couple of cars, maybe one car. But to understand, okay, so to what extent are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to sacrifice for that as an Asiatic? Do you think that knowing your nationality, knowing your divine creed, will that prevent you from getting wealthy? But that's how some of us think. Because again, this is a slave mentality now. You hear it now, it's Black History Month, first day, Black History Month. And what is the first thing that comes out of our people's mouths? We are descendants of slaves. So we're about to be overrun with torture.
Come on, Sheik.
We're about to be overrun with 12 years a slave.
Oops.
We're about to be overrun with, well, what's another one? Roots.
Color purple.
Color purple.
Anything negative? Django.
Django. I mean, all and that's the thing. When we think about all the movies that we're associated with, even the ones that were in our minds are pretty cool, like Dolomite and Superfly and the Mac. But we got to realize what's going on in that too. These are this is the aftermath of the trauma. This is the aftermath of the PTSD. This is how we interact with each other. Right?
Indeed.
Come on.
So when we talk about, okay, so now let's go back a little bit further. Let's go back to post or the Reconstruction period. Frederick Douglass had, what did Frederick Douglass have? What organization did he have? He had the Freedmen's Bureau. And the whole it was the Freedmen's Bureau of Refugees. So we were considered, after the Emancipation Proclamation, we were considered refugees. So we weren't even considered citizens at that time. So we were being treated like quote unquote immigrants. We were being treated like those that were banished from our own land. So it wasn't like our ancestors kicked us out of Africa, if you will, or kicked us out of the tribes. We were taken. But again, this is how you're being bred to think differently. That's the essence of European psychology. The fact that you're bred to not think along the lines of your forefathers.
Wow.
But your thinking, your method of thinking your premise of thinking is predicated upon your trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So all the decisions that you make is based upon you not wanting to get hurt. You not wanting to go through any pain. And if that means avoiding anything, and sometimes that even means embracing vices to heighten the fact that you don't want to deal with that pain. Islam?
Islam, Sheik.
So I wanna bring it back to the prophet and the literature of the prophet. So we have in our keys the Lord self breeding hatred, slander, murder, lewdness, theft, and everything that harms. And we know that by way of insufficiency, instability, weakness, misery. I'm missing one more. Sheik, help me out. I always miss that one. Probably have to write it down. Inconstancy, that's what it is. Yeah, inconstancy. Those things are forms of PTSD. That's why our prophet gave us those measures. That's why he gave us. He said, okay, well, to deal with this one thing, we have to have love. Before we deal with anything else, we have to have love. We have to learn to love instead of hate. Mm-hmm. Hate is what? Hate is a reminiscent of PTSD.
Islam, Sheik. Come on, brother. Help us out.
When these things are bred, it creates a vicious cycle. Something that we will forever be a part of if we don't recognize and combat it with these principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Especially love. And when we may think that it's a daunting task, because to love somebody, how can you love someone that on the surface doesn't seem like they don't want to be loved? Mm-hmm. But what does our prophet say? Blessed are the ones that give love and don't demand love in return. Mm-hmm. So it's not your concern whether or not that person loves you back. Your duty as a Moorish American Muslim is to love that person. Now, what is love? There's always a debate that love itself is an action. But I beg to differ.
Come on now.
Because if I give this sister some roses, it's an act of love. So that means it's a thought. It's a mindset. Just like hate. That's a state of mind. The actions are what comes from that. These are divine principles. Peace is a state of mind. Truth is a state of mind. Freedom is a state of mind. Justice is a state of mind. So if we have these 5 principles that are known to man, that are all these states of mind, then there's a way, there's a resolve. Resolution is his name. We can combat these 5 deadly foes. And let's do this. I don't want to just be coming off the dome. So we have shorthanded. The bottom one is insufficiency of knowledge. Without a foe, a soldier never knows his strength. So how can you say that you're for love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice when you don't know the foes that combat these principles? How would you think about this to yourself? How is it that you can combat instability? How can you, inconstancy, weakness, misery, insufficiency of knowledge? We have love. Let's think about this for a minute. I'm gonna yield the floor because I think we're running out of time. Instability. When something's unstable, what does that mean? It's all balanced, right?
That's right.
So when it's balanced out, what do you have? You have peace. What about inconstancy? Things that are fluctuating. What is truth? What is falsehood? In other words, it's falsehood. So you will combat it with truth. What about weakness? What about weakness? Weakness is when you're not able to be upright. When you're unable to be upright. When you can't live according to law. When your will is sluggish. That's justice. What about misery? Misery with love.
All right.
Insufficiency of knowledge. That can be combat with freedom, the power to define. Knowing that the most important, the pinnacle of wisdom is the preservation of life. If you go into the chapter, the insufficiency of knowledge, you talk about, you see where, as I mentioned before, you have the rulers that, because of this one notion, not knowing the full outcome of the scenario, you send billions of men or thousands of men to war. Because the very little that you know. Islam?
Islam.
So, I wanted to revisit that. Revisit knowing thyself. I wanted to really just add on with the Brother Joseph's measure of knowing thyself. Because we constantly say it, but it's different levels of knowing what that means. Knowing thyself is not just knowing your internal, but your external. Islam family?
Islam.
Allahu Akbar.
حي على الصلاة